It's a pleasure to be here this Saturday afternoon, and I can see we have some folks in the room, and would love if this was really more of a conversation. I don't know if we'll be able to do that, because I know that some of you just seeing some folks here have been involved with in the redistricting process over the last few months. Some of you over the last years. This is something that we all recognize as part of our civic engagement spectrum, albeit it doesn't happen every day, right? When we talk about civic engagement, we talk about getting involved in your neighborhoods, making a difference in your neighborhoods, albeit whether it's a neighborhood council or a nonprofit organization that you're a member of, a board that you may serve on, conducting voter registration drives, encouraging people to become US citizens, all for purposes of being engaged to make things in our community, in our city, in our region, a much better place for all of us. And redistricting is a big piece of that, right? So when we start putting together all the different pieces, the puzzle that is civic engagement, it's a continuation of that great work that we do on a day-to-day basis in our communities, right? And of course the census, right? The census, which was able to enumerate the number of people that we have in our communities, in our city, for purposes of giving us an opportunity to calibrate, right, our districts, which is something that we do every 10 years, right? It allows us the opportunity to do some calibration, to look at the numbers that are in our city and figure out a way, in terms of how we're going to, just a process that's going to help us determine how we evenly spread the people that we have in the city of Los Angeles, throughout the country, actually. And from there, begin the process of redrawing our lines, right? We know that, populations change, whether it's people, moving into our neighborhoods, people that are moving out, death, births, that's all part of redistricting. And so what we saw in the last month, when we finally got this census data after waiting months and months and months, just given all the challenges that we had last year with the past administration, and some of the challenges that people faced in terms of getting numbered, is that we received, some numbers, and we saw that in Los Angeles, the population numbers did increase, right? So by about 2.8%, which means that we're going to have to now figure out a way through the redistricting process of spreading all those numbers across 15 council districts. So that's a lot. Just to kind of give you, a little update in terms of where we are, this commission actually began, was charged by the LA City Council back in October, November. And, that's where, the city council members were basically able to appoint representatives. This also included the mayor, the city controller, and the city attorney, right? And it basically, built this body, this 21-member body that is charged with advising the city council on its redistricting maps, right? And a lot of the work began back in April, back in May, when we started gearing up and we started actually hiring. Our executive director came on board in about April. I, who serve as a director of outreach and engagement, came on in May for purposes of engaging the community, right? And part of this, is critical. And I want to step back a little bit, because one of the things, that this commission actually put out there before it actually began its work is, give itself some directions, right? Identify, what are some of the principles, the driving principles that drives this commission. And with principles, we're talking about a vision. We're talking about a framework. We're talking about values. And so, for this commission, it was very important to have a basis that we could say, this is what our work is driven by. And that was very important because we all know, we've all been involved in our communities for many, many years, whether it's our neighborhood councils or if it's other bodies, that are decision-making or making community impact. We know that when it comes to our government, as much as we work closely with our government, the reality is that there is a distrust out there. And, especially with a commission like redistricting, it's easy for a cynic or a person to say, well, these individuals are appointed by the city council, right? And so there's this communication going on, and, we don't know where this is going, which is why transparency, dignity, equity, making sure that people know if we are having conversations with our city council, that it's put out there, right? And when you think about the process that we're undergoing right now in terms of the line drawing, this is all happening in real time in front of everyone. And many of you saw this happen a couple of days ago, beginning Monday and Tuesday, and actually continuing into this coming Monday, where, we began drawing these maps, right? Drawing these maps that were informed by a lot of the testimony that the community was submitting to us beginning back in July when we began in Council District 12. And it went on for a couple of months, right? When we ended in early September. But it was that information. It was finally when we got the census data, and of course, other relevant data sources, all that information was critical to informing this commission as it started engaging in this line drawing, right? And, this is not the easiest task. When it happens in the public, democracy, as we all know, is beautiful, but it's also very messy. And at times, it does create tension. And we saw that. But you know what? That's what we committed to. And, this process is not over. Many of you all have seen, some of the suggested maps, right, that have been put out there, not just from this commission, but also from other organizations, neighborhood councils, homeowners associations, groups throughout the entire city are basically proposing, right? They're saying, this is what we want to see, right? This is who we relate to. This is where our affinity is. This is where the best interests of our communities lie, right? Which is why it was very important for us to hear from community, albeit we didn't have the census data early enough, but the fact that communities were saying, hey, you know what? I have an affinity, I relate to these neighboring communities. These landmarks are important for me and us, and these streets, are a vital part of our culture here. That was important to hear, because we can assume that these commissioners understand that, right? Now, we know that these commissioners come from all over, but I don't want us to assume. So it's very important. It was very important for us to go out there and hear from neighborhoods, to hear that color, to get that play-by-play. That for us is making a big difference now. And so I put this forward because in the next couple of days, in the next couple of weeks, this process is getting even more real, right? Because we're beginning to now see what these areas, what these council districts may look like. And it is our goal after Monday's meeting on Thursday to have this commission adopt a draft final map, right? I say draft, right? Because it's still in draft form, but to come up, with a map that the majority of these commissioners can say, okay, we're ready to put that forward, right? And when we talk about putting that map forward, we're talking about some subsequent public hearings that we're going to be organizing beginning October 6th, right? October 6th, October 9th, October 13th, and October 16th. This is going to be the opportunity for Angelenos, for the community, to basically respond, to react and say, do I give it a thumbs up? Do I give it a thumbs down? Do I agree with this? What I put forward in terms of in terms of my testimony, in terms of our statements as organizations and neighborhood councils, is it reflected in there, right? So this is going to give the community an opportunity to do that. And the commission is going to then, have to readjust, right? They're going to have to play around a little bit more with these maps, right? Based on everything that we received before and what we get when people finally get to visualize, what these maps are going to look like. And then from there, our charge is that we present to the LA City Council on October 29th, a final report, a final map in terms of our recommendation, right? In terms of what we consider the people's map that will then move forward. At that point, on October 29th, our charge as a commission is over, right? It now lands in the terrain of the LA City Council. And so from, November on forward, the City Council is going to deliberate. It's going to go through their process, right, through their committees. The community is still going to be an active voice. And we encourage the community to still be an active voice there, to ensure, that their feedback, that their concerns, that their interests, right, and that their ideas in terms of how they see their neighborhoods is actually followed through on. And so, this is going to take place during that time. And we know that by December 31st, the City Council and the mayor is going to have to sign off on an ordinance that is going to validate these maps, right? And so once the City Council and the mayor approves that, then this essentially becomes, it becomes, it becomes our staple. It is the law. And so soon thereafter, it will basically take effect, so we could essentially see on January 1st of 2022, these new council districts going into effect, right? And the first elections that it's going to have an impact on is going to be the odd numbered council districts, right? Which will be held in June of 2022. So that's where we are at this point. We're at the crossroads. We are still hearing community testimony. We've put some maps out there. The community has responded, some favorably, others not as much. But this is, again, this is the back and forth, right? And like I said, the decision has not been made. Folks are still proposing, maps. We're still hearing from the community. I mean, I'm getting emails every day from people, letting us know, hey, you know what, you got to hear this part, we heard too much over here. So, part of my charge is to make sure that this process is inclusive of all voices that are out there, right? All our neighborhood councils, our homeowner associations, the nonprofit organizations, the mom and pop informal networks that are out there, groups that have been enfranchised and those that are not historically been involved here. My job is to make sure that we can get as many voices to the table in this process, right? This is what's going to make this map, these 15 maps, which I call the map, the map that's going to be representative for the city of LA, right? And this is a serious charge, as you all know, and I have so much respect for all of you because I've heard you in many of our hearings, in our meetings, what will happen this time around is going to have a deep impact on the next 10 years of our respective districts and our respective city, right? We're talking about people who are going to best represent our interest, right? We're talking about this work in terms of community change, in terms of systems change, in terms of serving folks, in terms of people getting their resources. I mean, this is what we're talking about. And, I take this charge very seriously. And that's why inclusion and respect for all folks is critical here. So I thank you. And at this point, I'm gonna go into the chat. I think that's what it is, because this is not a back and forth. which, you know, I think the virtual way brings many pros, but at the same time, you know, sort of this connection is somewhat compromised.
Rafael, let me know what works best for you. If you would like, I see that there are 15 attendees. If you would like for me to promote all attendees so that they can, you know, speak with you off and on, or do you just want me to call on them as they raise their hand?
Yeah, no, I think if we can open it up for the attendees and have folks raise their hand, and then we can do a back and forth and have this type of conversation, that for me is ideal. I mean, that's sort of what I'm used to working with. Thank you, Lorenzo.
No worries. And then I do see that there were 4 questions in the chat, so I'll go ahead and I'll allow speaking privileges for those individuals who had those questions. It was Glenn Bailey, Holly, Robert, and we'll do it that way.
Great. Yeah, I see Glenn there. Hey, Glenn.
All righty, Glenn.
Hi, Rafael. Hi, Lorenzo. So I don't know if you're seeing my, I think I put 2 into chat as they came, as the thoughts came to me. If you see them first, that might be fastest. Otherwise, I'm scrolling through.
Sure.
I know. So one, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I see your first question, Glenn. I was talking about Monday's meeting. And, you know, Monday's meeting is as you know, is a continuation of the last 2 sessions that we've had, right? So we thought we were going to have, you know, a pretty good idea of what these maps were going to look like last Tuesday. That wasn't the case. We had another commissioner, we had questions, you know, asking us to propose these other ideas for maps. And so, you know, from that, you know, we went back to the drawing board, right? And so actually we should be releasing some updated maps today, probably later today, so that folks can take a look at and then react to, respond to when we meet on Monday. You know, and I'll share that the map that came up on Tuesday was a map that would solidify the Koreatown community, because wow, there's been so many themes that have come up here, you know, during the last few months, Glenn, as you know, themes, you know, in the San Fernando Valley, right? Currently, we have, you know, these 2 sort of fingers, you know, that go south of Mulholland or north of Mulholland, depending on where you are, or the Cahuenga Pass. You know, you have the case of Koreatown, right? You know, that currently is divided into 4 council districts. You have situations around the undercount, which have impacted areas like CD 13, CD 14, CD 1, CD 9 to a certain extent. You have the question of Watts, right? Where will Watts go, right? Does it stay in its current district? Does it go elsewhere? You have, you know, other, you know, questions in South Los Angeles in terms of the preservation of Black leadership, Black representation out there. And then there's questions about the West Side. You know, we know that the West Side is, you know, is primarily coastal communities, you know, but, you know, do certain parts of that area come more into the interior, right? So these are all fascinating themes, you know, that have risen, you know, throughout this whole process, right? And community voice, you know, has been very instrumental in terms of helping them shape this, right? Actually, community voice is the reason why these issues have been risen, and we've had to sort of respond to and figure out how we put all this together, which is why earlier on I talked about the puzzle, but the puzzle is not solved by this commission, right? It's not going to be solved by our elected officials. It's going to get there, but that's why, you know, the voice of the community, right, of community members and that lived experience is so critical, because we don't understand all the nuances.
Righty.
Oh, my 2 specific questions, they're pretty simple, I think, as far as, you know, answering. Is there a maximum percentage of population deviation that is allowed for each, you know, for each district, city council district? And the second one was, in terms of the report, the final report of the commission, when that's filed to the city council, are you going to use the existing city file number that's associated with redistricting, do you know, or will a new one be created?
Oh, that's a good one. I don't know if it's an existing or a new file number. We will be filing a report, that basically is going to paint the experience and how we got here.
There's a council file that is associated with I think the creation of the council, definitely the funding level of the council. You probably are familiar with that. And I mean, the sooner you're able to, not today necessarily if you don't know, but the sooner the neighborhood councils can be given a heads up to watch for a new council file based on the commission's report, or just knowing, hey, it's going to be a sub-file for the existing council file. That really helps the neighborhood councils out, so we know how to proceed with filing community impact statements.
Okay, you know what? That's a really good question. So when you talk about filing the report, you're talking about the commission filing its final report.
Correct.
And
the city clerk will assign a council file number. They'll either use your existing one that's on there now, or they'll do another one. So I like I said, they may not have told you. It may be totally in their purview, but I thought I'd ask. So thank you.
Okay, you know what? Thank you for that, because I do not know the answer to that. But what I'm hearing you say is the final report is going to have a file number, whether it's new, whether it's an existing one. And this allows basically the neighborhood councils to then take the appropriate next steps in responding to that report.
Correct. Or they can just file, if they've already adopted a position and it's still relevant based on, your final report, they can just now file, instead of filing with the commission, which is what they do now, they would need to then take that and file it with the city council.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me find out. We have our information, so we can definitely connect and make sure that everybody else gets that, because I'm pretty sure other people will know that. I don't know the answer, but I will get that answer. In terms of the deviation, the maximum that we're looking at in terms of, making a case without going into heavy legal, sort of implications, right, is 10%. Right now, we could legally go above 10%, right, in some of these council districts, but then it's going to be the judge. I mean, it just becomes very complicated, right? So the rule of thumb has been, maximum 10%. You can make the case. We've had, some folks say, well, we probably need to go a little higher on that. But if we end up doing that, it makes a case much more challenging. It requires us to be much more prepared in terms of the data, right? And, just to let folks know, we did contract the advancement project to help us with an undercount analysis, because we know that an undercount, that we do have an undercount in the city of Los Angeles, like we do in many other cities across the nation. We just need to get a better picture of that. And, this undercount analysis will definitely help us if we need to go down that legal, that legal way.
Rafael, now I have Steve Randolph, last question, followed by Kevin. So I'll go ahead and allow them to speak.
Great.
For first, Steve, and then Kevin.
Yes, thank you for recognizing me. I actually had asked some simple questions. Is there a mailing list where we can be notified, for example, of links to the various meetings, the dates, times of the meetings, if we want to attend, or where we can be either emailed or receive information as to where we can access the very latest of the maps?
Yes, thank you, Steve, for bringing that up. My recommendation is that you actually go onto the city's website and sign off for the early notification system. And when you go in there, you can you can actually identify any city department, any city committee, and any city commission, and get notifications. So you can go on there and sign on to the redistricting. And so you will basically get notifications that informs you of the agendas that this commission is having, materials that we're posting, and when the meetings are going to be taking place. You can also go onto our website. Our website is laccrc2021.org, and you can find the same information there. And you can sign on to onto our notification system there, and we'll make sure that you are informed of upcoming meetings and activities.
That's great. Thank you so much. Just one more quick question. You mentioned several communities that where you're having issues, and I'm well aware of those. I happen to be on the West Hills Neighborhood Council, and I know that the community of West Hills, which is currently in CD12, as far as I can tell, the majority of this community wants to stay in CD12. Do you know if that's a possibility that it's not going to be in? Because I know I'm going to get this question.
You know what, there are many configurations, right? I mean, right now, this commission is looking at all configurations in terms of, what these council districts can look like, right? And so I would encourage you to go onto our website where you could see these maps and see where the West Hills community is in. From my I would encourage you to do that. I do not want to say right now, whether it is or not. I've seen maps where West Hills is part of CD12. CD12 for the most part, it's pretty static, right? There are questions about North Hills West, and that community is organized as well. But this is where I definitely encourage you, Steve, and the members of your neighborhood council to go on there and see where West Hills is. But I don't see a lot of movement there. And the last thing that we want to do is divide communities, right? There are folks, folks in Watts who are like, oh, well, you know what, you're people are talking about dividing us. Part of the goal of redistricting is to make sure that we can keep communities as much as possible intact, right? There's no need to break up communities. Now you have communities like Koreatown, right, that are represented by 4. It is a goal of this commission to to minimize that, and as much as we would want to see it all unified, there's still a lot of considerations out there, but what if you can bring it down to a lower number, right? And this goes to other communities, right? Because other communities are experiencing the same thing. So yes, Steve, highly encourage you to go onto our website. You'll see our latest maps. We're going to have a new map that's going to appear today, probably later on today, that's going to show new configurations in terms of what CD12, what CD3, and other areas are being looked at right now. But I do want to stress, no decisions have been made as of yet.
Thank you so much, Raphael. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Raphael, before we get to Kevin, I was wondering if you can just say aloud what the website is for those individuals who would like to log onto that site.
Thank you, Lorenzo. And I'll put it in the chat room as well. It is laccrc2021.org.
Perfect. Thank you. Kevin?
Yes. Hi. Hey, Raphael. It's good to see you. This is Kevin Dieterle.
This is my old pal, Kevin.
So yeah, good to see you.
See you. Well, I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Yeah. I have a couple of questions. So I guess the first thing, and obviously I know it seems so far away because we're currently in the 2020 census redistricting process, but I think given the experience of this, redistricting process, which I think we would all agree is kind of unusual in some ways, or was unusual and kind of unprecedented in some of the things that we were reacting to, and that there were some, I think, imperfect things about like just the delays in the release of data, et cetera. Has the commission thought about, potentially doing a moratorium of the process and lessons learned from this cycle that they would, consider kind of documenting for our future redistricting process, in 2030? Because I think even absent the data, I think there are community conversations that we could probably start having earlier and organizing around so that we're more prepared for the release of data. I think that some of us were not caught off guard, but I think it's hard because there's not enough time to do as much community engagement as you'd like to on sort of the front end. And so I guess I just consider memorializing some of the lessons learned and maybe things that you would do differently or prepare for, keep in mind as we look forward to the next cycle, which I think we can all hope will be a lot better. And then the other question I had, which was more of a kind of nuts and bolts question about considerations. I know one of them is the effect of redistricting on incumbents, and basically you can't, obviously, as it makes sense, you can't create a district basically for the purpose of ousting a sitting, elected official. I guess I was wondering if there's any information on like how that distinction is made about like for the purpose of like ousting them, because I think sometimes you draw a different or a more compact district and people assume that the implication would be that there might be a change in representation, right? But that's not a foregone conclusion, right? So that might be an example of a map that is not for the purpose of eliminating that office, but might have that impact. And how is that distinction made? Because I think I personally see in some of the maps, it feels like they're gerrymanders to preserve a incumbent versus preserve communities of interest together, if that makes sense. And so that there's pushback on kind of designing more compact and contiguous districts because it would result in a change of representation, right? Even if that's not, I guess, I don't know if I'm wording that right, but just curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's one of the reasons why, Kevin, we as we were as we began looking at how we were going to draw these lines, we saw it from a regional perspective, first of all, right? Which is one of the reasons why we created these 4 regional ad hoc committees, right? To look at these areas of the city from a regional perspective, not necessarily from an individual city council district, right? But really look at it from a regional perspective, right? We know that many communities, in districts, not everybody looks at community from a city council district perspective, right? I mean, there are folks that basically navigate, areas like Westlake and Koreatown and the East Hollywood area without even knowing that there's a council district there. People don't live, within the framework of a city council district. They live,
Exactly.
It's from regional. So that's, so that was the first thing, is that we saw it from that perspective. And then secondly, as we were beginning to draw out these districts, we purposely left out the district numbers, right? Because we didn't want that to confine us, right?
Yeah.
We wanted a little bit more freedom so that we can get to a place that when it comes to that, we could say, okay, you know what, this is how we got here. Now, I will say that in considering city count and the redrawing of council districts, one can look at an incumbent and where they live, and it is a factor. It is not the determining factor, but you know what? Just like census data, other data sources like the American Community Survey, or right now we're getting incarceration numbers, that, and community testimony. All that also plays a very important role in it. So from our framework is seeing it from a very regional community sort of navigation, and then yes, as we begin to look at this, you'll say, okay, you know what, in this area, well, this council member is not there anymore, and so, that is a consideration, but it is not, I do want to say it's not the driving force, from our perspective, actually, and from the city charter's perspective. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, Kevin, there.
No, that's helpful. I mean, I think it's obviously a complicated issue, right?
Yeah.
There's like a lot of factors at play, and I was just kind of curious about the thought process on your end around those issues, but they're obviously very fraught and play out.
Right. Now, in regards to your first question, absolutely, we are learning so much from this process. I don't know about a moratorium, but I can tell you there have been a lot of lessons learned, and we're right now also, as we are doing the outreach, as we're doing the line drawing, as we're talking to community folk, we're also working on our report, right? I mean, there's just so much information, that we've gathered along the way. And I'll tell you, what you stated in terms of this is not the ideal setting for us to do this work, given the past administration's,
Right.
Sort of that experience,
Yeah.
150%, you're right. But I do have to say, that as we consider 2030, because to a certain degree, the education that we're providing right now, especially for those new communities that have historically not been involved, I almost feel, in essence, from an organizing, from an advocacy perspective, that we're really sort of preparing people to be those advocates in 2030.
Oh,
right?
great. That's
They're
great.
going to be positioned to be much stronger in 2030 because now they know that this is part of our process. We know what the impacts are, and we know that we have to be engaged, right? That we can't forget about this. But that's going to require that we start this process at least 2 years beforehand, right? The education, the engagement of community members needs, and along with the census, we need to do that work. Begin doing that work in 2027.
Yeah.
Right. The city, and this is where, and public-private partnerships, Kevin. This is where philanthropy or nonprofits and local government. This is where we leverage our resources, and we maybe contract neighborhood councils or community-based organizations who we can deem as trusted messengers to begin doing that work, right? Begin engaging people in the conversation, begin looking at maps even then. And it's okay that we don't have the census information. I mean, this time around, showed that we could do a lot without having census information, right? Yeah. It's not ideal, but we learned a lot from it. And so, that's definitely one of the recommendations that we're looking at. Starting earlier, investing in local infrastructure to do that, so that when 2030 comes around, we're able to, just automatically, get into that process. We have a much larger period for people to be engaged on this issue, which allows us to be not as reactive as we are right now, right? And actually, it allows us to even do much more bridge building in our communities, right? So that's definitely one of the areas. Infrastructure in terms of how we carry out this work. I mean, I started this in May. This should start much earlier from a city perspective, and also just making sure that we have all the elements that we're going to need, right? From public affairs and outreach. I mean, there's so much on the digital side, that we've learned that we could have done more of. And we've done quite a bit, but there's more that we can do. We need to understand technology a little better. So I wish we weren't in this situation, right? We're in the midst of a global pandemic. We have nonprofits that are out there, doing outreach on vaccinations. We had the recall. I mean, there was just so much stuff going on, but if we're able to sit back and begin organizing 2, maybe 3 years in advance, we could do so much more.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciate the thoughtful response.
Thank you.
Rafael, up next, we have Jeannie Hetfield, who has a question as well. Jeannie?
Yeah, thank you. And let me preface, I'm with Valley Village Neighborhood Council. And if my screen in the last 10 minutes has frozen twice, so if you get no response, that's probably why. Given what you said about the vision and the principles you're using, inclusion, transparency, dignity, and all the others, I was just curious if you could give us an idea, given the current CD mapping, okay, how egregious maybe is the mapping given what your principles are now? I mean, how much do you think radically would have to be changed other than what's there now?
Okay, Jeannie, I'm trying to understand your question.
Yeah.
So as we are drawing maps for the city, we've had those conversations with the entire commission. I mean, minus the ad hocs that were created, and the ad hocs were comprised of, up to, I think it was 5 commissioners, right? Because we wanted to abide by the Brown Act, right? So anything that went above that, would be compromising the Brown Act. And so, but we also made sure, that these ad hocs also understood that they couldn't be communicating with other commissioners, right? And the reason why we said that is that, those conversations can't take place without the public in the room. And so, and the public in the room is, the public virtually in this room. And so the first time that all our commissioners got to hear sort of this big picture was last Monday, when the public was also able to hear, right? So we all went through this together. And then in regards to, the maps, that we've been talking about, I mean, we have posted them on our website. And let me see if I can actually go onto our website right now, and because I want to show you where these maps are. Give me a quick second here. I just want to make sure that I got it here. It is okay. I think this is it. Hold on. I think this is it right here. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, this is our website, and, on our website, you basically have all the information, that you'll need to know what's going on with redistricting, right? Our vision, our values, community engagement, which is where we have, all our information. This is also where we are posting, right? What your neighbors are saying, right? So all the community impact statements that neighborhood councils, are putting forth are in here, right? Here you get to see Bel Air, Beverly Crest, right? So, they've taken a formal position, right? And so we make sure that this information is also public, right? All of your community of interest forums, right? So, your submission in terms of, your thoughts in terms of how you describe your community. Some communities, have also drawn their, they've drawn their maps. And so, that is available here online, for purposes, again, of transparency. We want people to see all this information. And this is something that people do appreciate, right? In terms of the data, right? We've asked you all to, to draw your maps. Here's the process to basically go about that. And in here as well, you have a little, history, in terms of, maps from back in the day. 1972, I was in the first grade going to Hobart Elementary in what became Koreatown.
I guess what my question really was is not so much this, which I understand, but as a redistricting committee, were you given any sort of briefing by whomever, before you started the hearing process and whatever, based on the census data, which didn't come out until August, an idea of what problems might be out there with the redistricting, the current CD maps? I mean, were you given any kind of heads up that these are some problem areas based on the census data that came out? That's what I was really asking.
Okay, now that's an interesting question, Ginny. I mean, we have, received quite a few briefings from our chief legislative analyst and our chief and our city attorneys. But most of the information that we've gotten from, existing communities has been from the public.
Okay.
Has really been from the public. I mean, it would be easy to go to council members, but, first of all, I mean, we're quasi-independent, and from my perspective, while it's good to hear from all sources, including council members and organizations, we want to hear from the people, right? We want to hear from the people. So that's what's critical in terms of informing where we're going with this.
Okay.
So yeah. But I will say, and thank you for acknowledging the fact that we just got this information, back in August. I mean, it has made it a little challenging, and I will have to say that, some community members that said, okay, we don't have the census data, so what do you expect us to tell you? right? It's just sort of like, okay, but there's a lot you can say, which is why we really focused on the communities of interest. And now, later on, of course, people started getting this information, but we're getting our information, from the community.
Okay. And what were the 4 regions that you mentioned? You divided up the city into 4 regions. I would assume the valley is one, downtown. What were the 4?
Yeah, so it was so we kind of had to consolidate certain areas. So you have the valley because the valley's big. Then you had sort of the east side, part of the central area, and then you had the west side and the other part of the central areas, which is what I would describe, the areas between like Hollywood, so areas, like, Laurel Canyon all the way down to, the 110 freeway, that's what I would consider the central area. So those would be, 1, 2, and 3. And then you would have the south side and the harbor. That would be the 4th area.
Okay.
All righty. Thank you for that, Rafael. We also have, excuse me, Miss Joanne, but I also want to be mindful of the time. We are about 5 minutes away from timing, so we'll go ahead and allow Miss Joanne to make her questions now. Joanne?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joanne Russell. And Raphael, I could not agree with you more that we have to start this early, because as my own community project, I started telling people about redistricting, but unfortunately, the outward going communications with the community to get, because like when we did census, we found we had a lot of hard to reach populations.
Yeah.
So as much as I'm involved, I never got notified. I could drive myself to the site and get information. And at this point, there are still people I'm trying to at least acquaint with the process so that they feel included. How would I go? I see your maps. I've been to your site. I'm very familiar with your site. Thank you for putting the things there so it's accessible. But some people don't grasp information like that. Are there people that if we wanted somebody to come speak to a group through Zoom or something to help them understand what the process? Because I see now from what you said that in October, we're going to be reviewing what we've done. So that will be their final chance to really give any input. Am I correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so how can we go about the people who have been missed out of this process? Because I can promise you, I wasn't even able to get on not one of those calls because of my schedule, so that we can have a more inclusive input. How would, should I email you and find out who I could ask to come to a community speak? And then I was looking at your site because yeah, I would love to give some input because we weren't that public, that grassroots public campaign, but that was shortage of time. I can understand that. Because like it's gotten picked up by, I never got it through my neighborhood council. I never got it through my city councilman. And it's been like trying to chase a little puppy. So yeah, I just really want to grasp so I can share the information with the larger audiences that I'm working with.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for your question, Joanne. I am more than happy to, speak before a group that you have organized, some of your neighbors. I'm more than happy to do that virtually. If I'm not able to, I can have one of my colleagues do that. We've also contracted, some local organizations to help us with this outreach as well, through most of the parts of the city. But I always like telling folks, what, I will make myself available. I've spoken to quite a few neighborhood councils over the last few months, and it's part of it is my nature. I just love connecting to people, and I've been very privileged because over the last few months, and I grew up in LA. I grew up in downtown LA, MacArthur Park, Pico Union. I've just gotten to know so much more about our history. I feel like I'm a musician as well, so I feel like I'm on tour. I'm over in Chatsworth. I'm coming down to Van Nuys, Toluca Lake, and East Hollywood. I mean, there's just so many beautiful, great areas. I am more than game. So please, I put my email address on here. Connect with me. I'm more than happy to go out there.
Okay, because yeah, unfortunately, a lot of people are not connected with our neighborhood councils. That's part of the thing that I'm working with. So, you know, that group that's not, and then also I was using it to try to inspire them to be connected. But that's what I said, we did it in such a disconnect. It's like, okay, they even lost me. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay.
So it appears that that was, there are no more raised hands, Rafael, and that does bring us to our time of 3:40. And that is all the questions that we have. And I would just like to have a virtual round of applause for our presenter. Thank you so much, Rafael. I'm not sure if you have any other last comments before we end the session.
Thank you, Lorenzo, and thank thank everyone with the Congress, for this amazing event. To all the neighborhood council members for everything that you do on a daily basis. I know redistricting is one of the many things that you're engaged in. So much respect to everyone. We as a commission is here to serve our community and to make ourselves accessible and continue having these conversations. These next couple of weeks are pressing. I highly encourage people to connect. And so please go onto our website. You'll find our upcoming meetings. You'll find materials also that you can use. You have my email address. I am more than happy to just connect with your members and continue having this conversation. So again, thank you very much on behalf of the LA City Council Redistricting Commission.